Everybody, welcome back, and we are continuing our year in review series. This is going to be a two-parter. I have SpaethCo with me on this one. We are reviewing USBank, and the first part is going to be SpaethCo's experience with setting up for the USBank Smartly card. He made a number of moves in anticipation of Smartly, following what the guidelines purportedly were, and his experience there. And it's definitely something that I wanted to put out there because this may not be the experience of everyone, but this is definitely something of a cautionary tale, and I think it's well worth it. So the first part is going to just be SpaethCo's experience with setting up for Smartly and some various things about the program from there. And then in part two, we're going to talk about USBank and some comparisons to Bank of America overall. Now, what we didn't do in these videos is kind of give a grade for the year for USBank. I'm not sure what sort of grade I could give them. Smartly is a new approach for USBank, so it's really hard to grade on trying to change your approach to how you're bringing in customers, customer acquisition, and things like that. So, there's not enough information there. Now, the changes that have been made to the Altitude Go and the Altitude Connect have been largely negative. And then as part of launching the USBank Smartly Rewards card, USBank has temporarily discontinued the Altitude Reserve. Now, we don't know how long this discontinuation will go. It is no longer publicly available for application at the time of recording in the middle of November, but it is possible that it could come back in a couple of weeks, as was the case with the USBank Altitude Reserve when the USBank Altitude Go came out. The Go came out in the summer of 2020. There was a thing happening around the world that kind of didn't make sense to apply for a new credit card, especially one that, So USBank lost a lot of signups, and then come the wintertime when things started to get a little better, they decided to pull the USBank Altitude Reserve in favor of the Altitude Go and encourage applications that way. Then after a couple of weeks, they brought back the Altitude Reserve. It remains to be seen if the Altitude Reserve is coming back. So there's that. But we did talk about USBank in whole. We didn't really give them a grade. I don't feel comfortable giving USBank a grade just because they're taking a new direction with Smartly and customer acquisition. So it's really hard to give them a grade on that. And then, yes, the Altitude Go, Altitude Reserve, Altitude Go, Altitude Connect have lost some benefits. So yeah, you'd be marking them down for that. But it's kind of a question of how successful is Smartly going to be, and we don't know yet, especially given that with Smartly, there is part of the rewards calculation is like this 3-month rolling average. So it'll be interesting to see how folks initially get their rewards, because if they are just signing up now in anticipation, or we're just signing up in the middle of October in anticipation, they're not necessarily going to hit that 4% cap from jump. So we're going to have to see what happens. But this is a lengthy conversation, and I split it into two parts. So this is going to be part one. If you like what I do, hit the like and subscribe button down below. If you want to join the channel, please consider joining the channel membership. $2.99 a month, cancel anytime. Our subscriber count is on its way to 1,500. Thank you so much for everyone who watches. And if you really want to support me outside of YouTube, check out the pinned comment down below. Anyway, this is me and SpaethCo. Thanks for watching. And welcome, everyone. With me tonight is the man, the myth, the ultimate friend of the pod to stack your points, SpaethCo. Mr. SpaethCo, how are you today?
Doing great. I imagine this is going to be for a lot of people like watching Game of Thrones season 3. Like, who the hell is this guy? Do I need to care? Is he going to get killed soon? So,
no red weddings.
That like credit cards, I'll contribute what I can
here. No, absolutely. Now, SpaethCo is in a lot of creators' comments. He'll join lives when he can. He has a wealth of knowledge on and takes a different approach in terms of how you use cashback for travel points. He'll determine that sometimes paying the cash price is fine because of all the other benefits that you can get. And one thing that SpaethCo knows a lot better than I do is USBank. So I wanted to talk to SpaethCo about USBank's latest product, the Smartly card, the Smartly checking account, the Smartly reward system, because SpaethCo, in anticipation of Smartly's release this week, tried to set up the steps required to get the card and get the maximum cash earning rate on the card, because 4% sounds great to everyone, right? So, SpaethCo, what has your experience been with Smartly Rewards, Smartly checking, just the anticipated moves that you have to do to get into the Smartly Rewards program?
So I do think the initial steps were actually pretty easy. US Bank makes it easy to set up the checking account. There's a $450 bonus out there. So if you set up the checking account, please don't miss that. It's the only bonus you're going to get in this entire setup. So do not miss the checking account bonus. So it's relatively easy. The only thing that is unique about US Bank is they pull a novice in addition to check systems. So most people, I think, when they open a checking account, they just unfreeze checks and call it good. But Sage, Stream, and Innovis are the two kind of wild cards out there that, if you ever followed one of those, like how to freeze all of your bureau information, like that was posted about a decade ago, you probably forgot that you froze it. Once you can get past that, the opening up that account, easy. Getting the bonus, super easy. It says direct deposit, but transfers from other accounts tend to trigger it. So that tends to be pretty easy to go. The savings account, again, nice, easy to open. Everything's online. The account opening process is fine. It's when you want to make changes or do some slight modifications to the accounts that I think you start to find the cliff that exists for US Bank in terms of online support, and where the legacy bank kind of hides behind there. So my wife is an estate planning attorney. And so I am conditioned that every account I open, one of the very first things I do is establish transfer on death beneficiaries to make sure like there's no like delays in probate or anything else like that. So if you have a player two, that's one advice I would send out here. Make sure you had that all taken care of. You don't want it to go to court and delay your family getting access to money. So, and that was my first foray into figuring out some of the shortcomings here. So to get a transfer on death or pay on death beneficiary for the checking and savings account, you can't do it online. That was the first thing. Is like, can I do this online? No option. So called support to find out that the process behind it is you have to call them up. Yes, I'd like to add my wife as a pay on death beneficiary. Here's her information. You need her like name, social security, all that stuff. They type that into a computer, right? So like they're doing the digital entry right there. But what actually happens is they generate a form, they put it in the mail, they mail it to you. You have to sign that form and then mail it back, and that's how you get that established. If you can't do that, or if you don't want to do that, you can go into the branch where it's basically the same process. They'll ask you the same questions. They'll print out the form on a printer there. You sign the paper form, and then they do some other data entry stuff to enter it back in. Whereas like every other bank, like Bank of America, like it's a click on the website, add a beneficiary, here's their details. So that's like your first shot that like this is going to be a little bit of a challenge. The second piece that everybody is probably going for is the brokerage account, because that's the best, what's perceived, I guess, to be the best way to hit that $100,000 threshold to unlock that sweet 4% cash back.
Yeah.
And it seems like a tough requirement. I think it's maybe a little easier than a lot of people give credit for particularly if you've been working for a couple decades. So already you're gonna age a bunch of people out there, right? But if you've had like a 401k at work that you've rolled over to an IRA, if you have those assets in an account that can move, it's relatively straightforward to do. You can transfer those funds over. They'll do an ACATS transfer. US Bank does support that, and we'll get to that in just a second, where they'll just take whatever assets you had in your source account, they'll move it into your destination account. So you don't have to sell anything. There's no tax consequences, yada, yada, yada. So opening the account, you can do that all online. It's a form you fill out online. The initial account opening process, relatively straightforward. The first sign that there was going to be trouble was going for that asset transfer page, because at least when I open my account, there's a section that says transfer, online asset transfer. And the first error message that I got was only certain accounts are eligible for online asset transfers. Please see this page. There's a page that they direct to with forms that are all PDF forms. Okay, it's interesting. Go there, download the form. It's a fillable PDF that you download. You enter in your social security number, your all of your information, the assets you want to transfer, source brokerage. And there's two ways that they give you to submit that information. You can send it through the regular USPS mail, or you can email it to a group email address. And those are the only two options. So there's no online document submission process. You basically have to decide. In my case, I run my own email server, so I have a little bit more control over I can see it's a TLS connection. I know it's encrypted. I trust that their infrastructure is the same on their side. So I ended up going the email route. The only notification I got was I got the auto reply hey, we've received your request. We'll start working on it. Okay. So I put in that request. The other thing is transfer and death beneficiaries. Again, it's a form that you have to fill out all the information, submit it via an email, and you get the auto reply back. And then the other thing was enabling margin on the account, just so I could be able to borrow against any of the account or any of the assets in there. If there was a short-term liquidity crunch, I needed some cash, right? It's a short-term loan.
Right.
By the time I got to this, I think I was literally saying to my wife at the time, I don't want to do this. I realized at that point, the 4% I'm chasing is pushing me into a thing that I'm pretty sure I should not be doing. And the key is on the margin form, you have to submit a whole bunch of details, what's your experience with investing, and what is your current tax bracket. And it's when I realized that the tax brackets on the form haven't been updated to the 2018 tax changes yet. It's still the pre-2018 tax brackets on the form. So we're dealing with a lot of nice outdated forms and processing. The scary part for me is the only notification I got on any of those activities was the auto reply that, hey, we got your email. It wasn't that I didn't know that my beneficiary form was processed until I got the first statement, and the statement then says, my name, then TOD beneficiary. It's okay. So they processed that. Margin, there was no hey, we received your application, we've done it. Just all of a sudden one day, margin showed up under balances on the account. So the mechanism of interacting with them is you submit a form, it goes off to the ether, and that it's completed because something happens on your account, not because not because you got hey, we've done this, just so we've taken action on it. And I think the most troubling part of that whole process was the asset transfer. I submitted that. It took I want to say 2 weeks, where I just didn't hear anything. I kind of thought it was lost. And then all of a sudden I got a message from the source brokerage, we've got this transfer out request, just so you know, if you didn't submit this, get in contact with us. It's oh, okay. So they obviously moved forward with it. And then the next day the shares dropped out of my account. And then there was a couple days where they just were nowhere. They were out of the source account. They weren't showing up in USBank. And so I called, can you, I I know you processed the transfer because I'm assuming that's you that pulled the money out. Like the share count was right.
Right.
Well, we'll get a back office team to take a look at that. Well, like I can't tell you what's going on from our system, but they'll give you a call back. And I never got a call back, but the day after I made that call, the shares did show up in my account. So I don't know if it was, if I had been patient, they would have shown up anyway, or I called and that like kicked something down the line.
Right.
But that was my initial entrance into US Bank. And then once I could see the brokerage, that's where things just sort of, I didn't realize how much I took for granted in brokerage interfaces until I started to see US Bank's brokerage interface. Because like we all, like especially anybody who's done the Bank of America preferred rewards, we all love to rip on that interface because it's like a 90s computer science project, right? Like it's the most basic HTML, like somebody built this to be functional, not pretty.
Right.
But I think that's been like the big difference is like Bank of America, all the functions exist. And US Bank, it's like, all right, I got the funds in there. I want to be able to set up dividend reinvestment, right? This thing's going to throw off dividends. I don't just want it to sit in a settlement account.
Right.
Where do oh, that function doesn't seem to exist anywhere. And so I called and asked about it. Like, am I missing a setting? Oh, no, we don't support dividend reinvestment. Okay. And then I was reading more online, and a couple other people were saying like, oh, they were able to call and they were able to get it set up. And so I called again, and the second person I talked to like, was a couple days later. Like, oh yeah, to do dividend reinvestment, we have to go into the system. We have to, do this other setting. I can go ahead and set that up for your shares, no problem. So this is again like we're getting deeper into the like red flag. So you have to call to do these things, and you're not getting consistently the same information. Like this is standard stuff, and you're already getting like, oh, this can't be done. Oh, it can be done, but you're at the mercy of these people to, to get these functions taken care of. The other thing that is important, like if you have, not so much if you have an IRA. So if you have an IRA, you can move that in. You're not going to be selling or doing anything else with it, most likely. Or if you are, it's
Right.
just going to be a rebalance. Everything's within the account. If you have a taxable account, one function that they don't have that is wild in 2024 is you can't sell specific tax lots. So if you bought, 10 shares of Apple in 1984 and you bought 10 shares of Apple, 2 months ago,
Right.
you probably, and you need you're in a crunch for cash, you probably want to sell the 10 shares you bought 2 months ago because you're only going to pay the tax bill on whatever that's gone up compared to
Right.
the tax bill of whatever those shares have done since 1984. And the default method, the only method you can do if you pick online, is it will sell your oldest shares first. If you want to specify a more like a better tax selling rate, like I want to sell the shares I just bought, you have to call and pay $25 for a broker assisted trade in order to make that happen. That's your only option to navigate that.
That's not good.
And then I think the coup de grace for me was the communication just doesn't get better. I think I posted a couple screenshots, a couple places. Like you can
Mhm.
see every single account alert that you can set on one screen, and it's not really useful. Things like you can get an alert if a statement is generated, or if you have scheduled a transaction, or if a tax or a trade confirmation has been generated, or a tax form has been generated. Like it's like four things that you can get an alert on. So like not to bury the lead too much. Like I'm pretty sure I'm clearly I'm biased in this, right? Like I'm trying to get my money out at this point. So into this, I did try and transfer it back to the original brokerage that I got the stuff back from, or that I transferred out of.
Mhm.
Um, they approved, like that brokerage approved the transfer. US Bank denied it. Um, and I never got a notification from US Bank that like by the way, there was like somebody requested to transfer funds out of your account, which is really rare. Like I get that from every other brokerage I've ever transferred funds between. Like it's pretty important because ACATS is great.
Right.
Like it's really quick. Like you can move your funds within like a week or 2 weeks, and it generally is pretty seamless. But because it's so quick, you really, really want to know. So if somebody tries to pull funds, like I think Fidelity had a thing, a couple years ago where people were fraudulently doing withdrawals or doing ACATS transfers, you want to be able to stop that process. So
Right.
the initial request got denied. I called, and I've been given 3 different answers now on why the transfer was denied. First answer was, we have a 60-day lockout in the system. When you transfer funds in, they're stuck there for 60 days. Okay. But that person did say, I think that's what it is. I'm going to confirm that with our back office team, and we'll get back in touch with you.
You can't go with "I think" there.
Right. So like I do appreciate their position, right? Like they answered the phone. It's me going like, hey, I'm trying to transfer my funds out. Can you just tell me? And I'm sure they can only tell me what's in there, in front of their screen, right?
Right. What they can see and what they're able to see.
So I'll give them a pass on that. The second time I called, they're like, oh no, there shouldn't be a lockout. The back office team just denied the transfer. Okay, I don't know who this mysterious back office team is, but fair enough.
They don't sound happy.
No. And so I just decided to let it sit for another statement cycle. And as we sit right now, I'm actually trying to transfer out to just a different brokerage to go through a different process. And so far, all of the tracking says that it's approved on that brokerage's side. It has apparently been approved on USBank side. And true to form, I've not received a single notification from USBank that like funds are being transferred out of my account. So this is why like I love this idea of simplicity of 4%, right? Like I am drawn to that like a moth to a freaking flame. Like I will just like the idea of that simplicity is incredible. But seeing how this operates is one of those like I feel like I'm asking myself, am I willing to do really dumb things with a lot of money to chase a little bit of extra money? And I think that's where I'm out at the end of the day on this.
That the experience on the brokerage side alone just makes me want to go, okay, I can't get into US Bank consumer banking to start. Like I'd have to either get a card first and then set up an account, or try to go the brokerage route, or try to go the business accounts route. But that alone just has me worried.
So, and I'm gonna play devil's advocate here and talk out of both sides of my mouth. And I will say that US Bank's primary wealth advisory service is like wealth advisors in branch locations that are going to manage portfolios for clients. So the majority of their customers have somebody that's responsible for their portfolio and the trading, and like all of the transfers would go through them. Like they have all the infrastructure set up for that to be the mechanism of how their wealth management services runs. Okay. I definitely got the feeling like, if you've ever seen like a company that's done something like out of like they lost a lawsuit, or they were like fined for compliance, and they like just did the absolute bare minimum to comply with whatever they needed to do as part of like a settlement or something like that.
Hi, Wells Fargo customer here.
Exactly. That's kind of what the self-directed account feels like. Like it exists because somebody was compelled to create it, and it has exactly as much functionality as was technically required in whatever settlement they made.
Okay, that's fair. But okay. So if you're going to go down this path, it sounds like throw a lot of money at the problem or go the IRA route might be easier. But then we have to talk about the potential return. So if you could qualify for the 4%, And let's say you went the non-IRA route. You're not going to go the IRA route. You're going to park a truckload of money. And it's not really a truckload of money at the end of the day, but like for someone like me, it feels like a truckload of money. Because I have probably earned and spent more than $100,000 in my life, but I have never had that $100,000 just sitting there at the same time. Does the 4% really feel worth it if you're willing to sacrifice, interest earning on certain accounts, or just keeping $100,000 in an account that could be doing other things?
So, like the financial nerd in me is going to come out here a little bit. Like I've been at various points a Bogleheads forum contributor. Like I am definitely a tax nerd as well, and so that's where I look at keeping $100,000 in a taxable savings account, and I do worry a little bit, like not that you can't do it, but
Right.
like in a heavily taxed state like California, like the interest on your savings account is fully taxable as income at the state and federal level.
Right.
If you were to park that in like a California, muni mutual fund or money market fund, like not only do you not pay federal taxes on it, but you don't pay state taxes on it either. So like, yeah, it may pay 3% instead of 4%, but that's 3% effectively tax free.
Right.
That's huge for somebody who's going to keep that 100K around. Like that is a meaningful difference in your return. So by the time, and that's what I think where this setup gets a little deceptive, right? Like let's say I think the interest rates dropped. I think the top line interest rate is now 3.8%. So you park $100,000, you get $3,800 at the end of the year, roughly.
Right.
But you don't get to keep that $3,800. Like you physically deposited in your account, you'll see that $3,800. But offsetting that, you're gonna get a 1099 int that you're gonna have to report on your taxes. And oh, look, you made another $3,800 in income. That's going to be, you're going to have to pay that out in your state and federal taxes. And I think because that gets split up in another transaction, it's easy to discount like what you're actually paying to get those gains.
Now, let's say you've got the 100,000 parked in, you make you get the top line, you're getting 3.8. Yeah, you still have to pay taxes on that. But if you spend enough money on the Smartly card at 4%, could you make up for that theoretically?
So theoretically, it depends on what your sort like. And the easy thing to do is to benchmark against zero, right? So like if you were going to assume like I didn't have a credit card before and all of a sudden I'm getting 4%, like awesome, you've just like jumped up massively in how much you're going to take home.
Right.
But you have to benchmark against like cards you probably already hold. Like you probably already hold a 2% cashback card, maybe even a if you've got the 100K, maybe a 2.625% cashback card. If you're investing with Robinhood, maybe a 3% cashback card. Now the gains that you're chasing are incrementally smaller.
Yeah.
And I think that's maybe the trap of this is, I know many of us on the Anthony Venture Discord, when this first came out, it's like, this is amazing. And it was all of us that like at the time had the Bank of America Premium Rewards Elite card that in theory could get up to 3.28% and 4.375%, I think, on travel and dining if you take the money and buy flights through Bank of America's portal, like all the fun games you play to boost your earnings. So like the incremental gain we were chasing there is like extra like $700 per $100,000. Like it ends up not being all that much. So like just take the Bank of America flat 2.625 compared to 4% on the Smartly. Smartly will give you $4,000. Bank of America will give you 26.25. That's $1,375. So just short of $1,400 in incremental gain. But chances are like the Bank of America 2.625 isn't your only card, especially if you're watching this video. So like for the consumer of this video, you probably have other cards in your stable. You probably have a couple of 5% earning cards. You probably have many 3% earning categories. If you have the US Bank Altitude Reserve, you're already getting 4.5% on mobile wallet. So now the thing you're chasing is incrementally smaller. And I think what particularly who this is going to appeal to is people I think who have large estimated tax bills. So like I think I mentioned earlier, my wife is an estate planning attorney, and she's a solo practitioner. So um, because she's self-employed, we pay her estimated quarterly taxes every year, and it's a it's a fair chunk of change. And so that's an opportunity where, like, yeah, it seems like this is super great. Like we can get 4% back, but the other thing that you don't factor into that is, well, to pay your taxes with a credit card, you have to pay like for federal taxes 1.85%
Mm-hmm.
in processing fees. State is probably in the 2.2, 2.3% range. County taxes 2.2 to 2.3% range. Let's blend that out to 2%. So
Yep.
if you had that mythical $100,000 tax bill, like you're still paying an extra 2 grand on top of that in fees to get the 4%. So like now you're chasing 2 grand. Like every angle you attack this, the incremental gains are actually a lot smaller than they kind of appear at first.
So potentially worth it, but make sure you do all your math.
Yep. Yeah,
Totally fair.
I think when you break it down, the Smartly card is definitely like they are hunting, like to use your vernacular, like they are hunting whales, right? They are trying to shoot for like bring your assets in. That's their big push. Honestly, I think the gain might be on the lower end. So like US Bank hasn't had a flat 2% cash back card before. Like this,
No.
I think this is their first one. So, and I guess as of today, it's available for product change. So if you had an old, maybe you had two Altitude Go cards, or you and a spouse each have an Altitude Go card. You don't need both of them. Well, you can product change one of them to a 2% card. Never hurts to have that as an option. It's a free card. Looks kind of nice. I kind of like their design aesthetic.
I like the design aesthetic on it. I do love that they're advertising premium metal card.
Yes.
It's funny to me. I taking a step back, maybe 4% isn't like, yes, 4% is aspirational, but there are two other levels to the card where you can get 2.5% if you have 5,000 to just under 50,000, and then 3% flat with 50,000. 3% flat is the Robinhood Gold card.
Yep.
And the old AOD card that got nerfed to the AOD credit union card in, I want to say it's Alabama or Tennessee, one of those. It doesn't matter. But this old credit union card was a flat 3% earning card. Then they nerfed it to 3% on the first $1,500 of the month, and it'd be higher than the Alliant credit union card, which you have to have $1,000 in. You have to have a mobile deposit, a direct deposit coming in. You get 2.5% on the first $10,000 of the month. Which, if you're spending more than $10,000 a month, don't use don't use that card. So you could still get by pretty good at 2.5% and 3%, and that I think adds to your incremental your increments argument from before.
So this is the thing I've been kicking around, and I might need your help on this.
Mm-hmm.
So when I look at this, it's weird to have the argument of like, I want to set this up because I don't like all the effort of chasing sign up bonuses or whatever. I just want a high rate earning card. But at the same time, like you do have to go through a whole bunch of steps to make this happen, right? Like you got to open accounts, you got to transfer money, you have to get the Smartly card somehow, either by product change or you have to apply for it. Like
Mm-hmm.
all those gyrations you're already going through. So it seems a little weird to say like, I'm not willing to open a card when you're clearly willing to open a card. And this is where I like go back to, so if I had 50 grand, right, I can open Bank of America, the checking account. I think there's two bonuses. There's either a $350 bonus or a $500 bonus. And the 350 is, I think, easier to qualify for. It's like transfer in $2,500 and you qualify.
Yeah.
The 500, I want to say, is like you have to park 15 grand in the checking account for like 45 days, maybe. It was relatively simple.
Sounds about right. I don't have the full Bank of America page up at the moment, but we can always fact check that.
So if you can get that bonus of, all right, so you open a checking account, you get 354 or 350 to 500. All right. So the next thing is you're going to open a brokerage and you're going to transfer in assets. Like assuming that you didn't have Bank of America already. Bank of America runs regular promotions on a transfer where they will, like if you transfer in 50K, I think you get 200 or $200. Whereas US Bank, you transfer in 50K, you get nothing.
Right.
US or Bank of America, you open the premium rewards card. Like even if you don't want it long term, like you just open the card, you spend your $4 grand or maybe it might even be $3 grand on that card now that I think about it, and you get $600. So you're already up to like you get maybe over $1 grand in money up front just to establish that card. Now, granted, you're only going to get at the $50,000 level, you're only going to get 2.25%, but they gave you $1,000 up front. Whereas like US Bank, you have to go through, the only bonus you're going to get is that $450 on the checking account. You get nothing for opening the savings account. You get nothing for opening the brokerage account. You get nothing for transferring into the brokerage account. You get nothing for opening the Smartly account or product changing to it. You get nothing there. You are 100% reliant that you are going to earn enough on that card before it gets nerfed, that you're going to come out ahead, where like the other banks will like just give you a bunch of money up front. I mean, I know we like to rip on Chase, but like Chase, like you can open a card, spend $6 grand and walk away with $990. Like that is, they run that promo pretty regularly.
At least twice a year.
So like you have all these other opportunities. Like if you really wanted to chase the returns, I feel like you could do better without having to move assets all over the place and deal with some of the shenanigans of the US Bank account. And so that's one of those, I'm questioning who this account is for. And like I think that my initial thought was like that 2.5% does seem like a pretty decent earning rate. Like if you only need $5 grand to qualify for that. And now that I think about it, like the only place that would make sense is the brokerage, which is terrible. But like that, if you wanted to do savings, like you're not going to qualify into the highest rate of the savings plan or the savings account. So the money that you give up in interest on the savings account, transferring the $5 grand, I don't know if you're going to earn enough spending on the card with that extra 0.5% to earn back the interest that you're going to give up on the savings account. So I don't know who this account really is for, unless there's something I'm missing. But I think the big thing behind it is that all of those things are kind of, they're not in your face, right? Like you don't really look at it as like, I'm putting $5 grand in that account and I'm going to keep $5 grand in as an emergency fund anywhere, or as an emergency fund anyway. But if you could get it earning 4% versus 2%, like that's a pretty big difference at the end of the year. Like it's an extra $100, right? So now your free card that's earning 2.5% is actually costing you $100. Are you going to earn enough with that extra 0.5% to offset that